It was just several weeks ago now, it was actually October 23rd, that here in the Senate we had the opportunity to recognize a friend of so many of us, a mentor certainly to me, a leader in Alaska, and this was the life and the contributions of Senator Ted Stevens. The Alaska congressional delegation was able to join with members of the Stevens family, many of his friends, his congressional colleagues, a lot of formal staff, but we were able to unveil a portrait of Senator Stevens that had been commissioned for him as the President pro tem of the Senate. It was a lovely ceremony, a great occasion, and now his portrait hangs back behind where the presiding officer is sitting, back in the hall there. But it was a great occasion to be remembering the contributions of Ted Stevens. He represented my state from 1968 to 2009. He was the longest-serving Republican U.S. senator in Senate history at the time that he left office. And he left office with considerable policy legacies. For those in the fishing industry, the work that he did with Senator Magnuson in creating the Magnuson-Stevens Act that really has become that framework for sustainable fisheries is something that we continue to look to. His work in sports with the creation of the U.S. Paralympics, his encouragement, all that he did with women and girls in sports regarding Title IX. We all know his background, his history. He was a pilot in World War II, and certainly here in the Senate was a staunch advocate for our veterans and for all of our military. He worked hand in glove with his Senate brother friend, Senator Daniel Inouye, chairing not only the Appropriations Committee itself, but the Subcommittee on Defense Appropriations, and in that role helped to advance so many of our national priorities. Well, Mr. President, today is Ted Stevens' birthday. If he were alive today, he would be 96 years old. And later this evening, there's going to be a gathering. It's an annual gathering on the 18th of November. Friends of Ted gather to just raise a glass to a wonderful man, a strong leader, a great Alaskan, and truly a friend of mine. I think today Ted Stevens would be smiling at what Senator Sullivan, Congressman Young, and I were able to observe this morning. The three of us, the full Alaska delegation, were in Fort Worth, Texas at the Lockheed Martin plant, and we were able to participate in the signing as we seek to roll off the line the first F-35 that will be based there in Eielson Air Force Base. It will be the first of two squadrons, a total complement of 54 F-35s, but it was a reminder to us all of all that we have done in the state of Alaska, focusing on Alaska's geostrategic position, not in the country, but in the world. And Ted Stevens clearly recognized that. He was a visionary in so many areas, and he was certainly a visionary when it came to understanding the promise, but also the challenge of the Arctic itself, and how we ensure that in this region, a region that is pretty remote and pretty isolated, but a region that is prepared, and then with that preparation, able to protect. And so today, as we think about that role that Senator Stevens envisioned for Alaska in terms of our role in protecting and defending the the country, but also our broader, more global role and responsibility. I come today to talk about legislation that I have introduced along with Senator Sullivan to authorize the Department of Defense to create a 6th Regional Center for Security Studies focused on the Arctic. I think it is very, very clear to us that the Department of Defense in particularly is keying in on the challenges that we face in the Arctic. And with the growing prominence of the Arctic in global geopolitical and strategic affairs, now is the time to give the Department of Defense the tools as well as the abilities that it needs to foster the research and the dialogue that we think will be critical to our nation's security. So let me give a little bit of background in terms of these regional centers. The Department of Defense currently has 5 academic regional centers for security studies. They cover the regions of Europe, Asia Pacific, Africa, Near East Asia, and the Northern Hemisphere. And what these centers aim to do is support defense strategy, objectives, and policy priorities through a pretty unique academic forum, as well as to foster strong international networks of security leaders. Just to give you kind of a base of comparison, what we're talking about here in specifics, the Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies is actually fully entitled the Daniel K. Inouye Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies. It was established in Hawaii back in 1995, but it's a DoD institution that provides a forum where current and future military and civilian leaders from the Indo-Pacific gather to address regional and global security issues and enhance security cooperation through programs of executive education, professional exchange, and building relationships of trust and confidence. Currently, over 30 countries send participants to engage and learn and really build those relationships. So the Ted Stevens Arctic Security Studies Center, which is what we seek to name this Arctic Center, will be modeled after the Daniel K. Inouye Asia Pacific Center. So the fact that the two of them worked hand in glove for so many years, for decades really, on these issues of national security, national defense, from both the perspective of the far north as well as the Asia Pacific, it's only fitting that we would model an Arctic Center, the Ted Stevens Arctic Security Studies Center, after the Asia Pacific Center named after Daniel Inouye. Senator Schatz clearly understands the value of the Asia Pacific Center, and he's joined Senator Sullivan and I as a co-sponsor of this legislation. But what we're really seeking to do here, the overarching goals of this Arctic Security Studies Center, is to find solutions for the greatest security challenges of the circumpolar Arctic region, to help promote greater understanding of the Arctic. We know that we've got to do more there, as well as facilitate greater engagement and potential solutions for the many challenges that we know lie ahead. It is an evolving world up there. Let me tell you, Mr. President, it is an evolving world as we're seeing the impact from climate change, as we're seeing ice recede, as we're seeing waterways open up, as we're seeing greater access, as we're seeing greater threats. What are we doing to prepare? I think it's important to recognize that the proposed center would be additive in nature. It's not looking to take away from any of the other very excellent efforts that support the DoD's mission in the Arctic. What we're seeking to do is provide additional value while creating new partnerships and supporting critical research. We hope, or certainly the intent here, is to complement current structures like the Multinational Securities Forces Roundtable. This is led by USCOM and the Norwegian Defense Staff. The center will build on the Arctic Coast Guard Forum, where effectively you have senior leaders from the Coast Guards from all over the Arctic nations to gather to discuss defense and security concerns. It was just this last Thursday, I had an opportunity to be part by video conference to speak at the importance of this strategic dialogue at the Arctic Symposiums and Arctic Senior Leaders Summit, which was held by Northcom and Alcom. So again, what we're seeking to do here is to help facilitate the array of international senior leaders and Arctic subject matter experts to come together for these substantive dialogues on the Arctic. The Arctic presents an opportunity to expand the DoD regional center model to study the rapid changes in communications, technology, environment, and societies in remote, sparsely populated areas with underdeveloped infrastructure. I mentioned that this would be additive in nature, that we seek to collaborate with other current structures that are doing good work, but we seek to have close partnerships with research centers like we have at the Wilson Center's Polar Institute, at the University of Alaska Fairbanks Arctic Domain Awareness Center, as well as the Coast Guard Academy's Center for Arctic Study and Policy. But we also need to have strong involvement from Native leaders and Indigenous peoples. How we incorporate, how we elevate the Native expertise in the Arctic that has been informed by centuries of experience living in the region must also be a priority. The center should also be used as a joint commanded venue with Canada and other Arctic partners. This would be effectively replicating the success of the model that we have with the George C. Marshall Center with Germany. So since Senator Sullivan and I introduced this bill to establish this new DoD Arctic Security Strategy Center, we've gotten great input. I'm pleased that we've seen a lot of interest from within our state and outside as well. Several have reached out to our offices to express their interest and support in developing the concept of this center. I think we see Arctic security emerging as an area of threat as well as interest, as it certainly remains the likely spillover conflict area should confrontations occur within Europe or Asia. So great scholarships plus international and interdisciplinary engagement from an Arctic center would help advance defense readiness, develop Arctic awareness, and improve allies and partner capabilities to support multinational security cooperation across the circumpolar Arctic. So it's something that I'm excited to be working on, and I know Senator Sullivan is as well. I would invite other colleagues to join us in this effort. Mr. President, I think that our friend Ted Stevens would approve of this as well.